Hey everyone, this is Kurt Frankum with Leading Saints, and today I have the opportunity to connect through the powers of the internet with Brooke Reynolds. How are you, Brooke?
Hi, doing great, thanks.
Awesome. Now tell us where you're calling in from, or where you're at right now, and your what state you're from.
We're in Laguna Niguel, California. So Southern California, about halfway between LA and San Diego and Orange County.
Nice. So the weather's always perfect there,
It's
right?
usually pretty good.
That's awesome. So we were just mentioning before we hit record, and we're going to talk about President Evanson here, and because you got a really special stake president, and he's never going to admit that. I've tried to corner him for an interview. He turns me down. Someday, with your help, Brooke, we're gonna get him here. But some individuals may remember the interview I did with the stake presidency in Salt Lake City that's doing these early morning or these what do they call them? But just like a morning side type event where they're talking with seniors in high school about the gospel topic essays and sort of really helping them understand the messiness of church history and some of our doctrines and whatnot. And so it's this great idea. We got a great response from this. And they talked about this stake president where this idea came from somewhere in California. And we tracked him down. It was President Evanson. So a lot is coming from him, and he can skip past this where we're just gloating over him. But he's
No,
pretty awesome stake to be a part of.
he's great. And I don't know how he does it. He must not sleep at night, but he somehow, I've talked to lots of other people who say, like, I just feel like, I must be the most important thing, on his agenda, or the most important thing that he's thinking about. And every person on state council feels that way. So I'm not sure how he does that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, and he connected me with you because you've been doing some really cool things with social media, and both, from what I understand, as far as missionary work, but also just unifying the stake and keeping everybody on the same page
Yeah,
with
for
all
sure.
things. So, and you've sent me a detailed outline here. So I'm just going to say, Brooke, where are we going to start with this?
Let's start just with, I get asked a lot, why even have stake social media pages? Because the church does a really great job in social media, especially the last 5 or 6 years, I'd say. They've kind of realized the power those channels have in getting a message out to a huge amount of people. And, why do we need to do anything on a stake level if you can just share stuff the church is doing? So that's where we've come from. We got into the game kind of early. I think I'm the third social media director in our stake. We've had a Facebook page and an Instagram page for at least, I'd say 5-6 years. So
yeah.
I remember, well, the person who started it, I remember her saying that she had to kind of beg the stake president. It was
really?
a different stake president than we have now. But it was just such a new idea for a stake to have a page that they thought that was super weird.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read down the list of all the channels that you have. You have a stake website, stake Instagram, stake Facebook, a third hour or private Facebook group for Come Follow Me, a youth Instagram, Good News Laguna, which is that a Facebook community page?
It's Facebook and Instagram.
Oh, okay. And then Twitter, YouTube channel, Stake Podcast. Oh, you're speaking to my heart. Local Just Serve, and YSA Instagram. And yeah, many people may look at that list and say, way too much work, right?
Yeah.
But this is the product of many years. It's not like you woke up and started all these channels.
For sure. And I think we started first with that Instagram page, and then it kind of grew from there. And we've just kind of been adding things as we've needed them. It's definitely not, let's create a bunch of work for ourselves, so why not start all these pages? It's just trying to reach as much of our stake and our community as possible. Yeah. And each of those channels kind of hits a unique audience or a unique target.
Yeah. So just to put your stake into context, maybe just tell us about the geographics, the demographics. What's your stake like?
Sure. Our stake covers 6 different cities: Laguna Beach, Laguna Niguel, Aliso Viejo, Dana Point, Laguna Woods, and Laguna Hills. So it's a nice area in Southern California. Like you said, the weather's always good. We have in that, we cover 4 different high schools, a lot of different cities. So we've got lots of different, civic, city councils and things we're working with, lots of different churches across all those cities as well.
Yeah.
So
great. And what is your, what's your official calling then, the stake social media?
I think my official calling is that I'm the assistant director for communications.
Okay.
It used to be public affairs. Now it's called communications. but we kind of just say that we're the media team,
Yeah.
and that's been
And
working
then
for us.
as far as like how big is the team that's working with this? And then maybe how does that team work with individual wards?
Sure. We have probably 5 to 6 people on our media team usually. That kind of shrinks and grows as we need it to. And that's, I'm kind of the director and kind of gather content and oversee all the channels, but there's specific people who are in charge of the Instagram account and the Facebook page and things like that. And we're always kind of looking to grow as we add channels and pages. And luckily, President Evanson is nice and can give us people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you talk about as far as the stake social media team, or why you do these different channels and have a presence on social media basically comes down to outward, inward, and mission, right? And
Yeah.
so that's going to be maybe the crux of our conversation
Yep.
today. So, and I know you have some slides and whatnot. I don't know if that's the next step is to jump into those slides or
Yeah. Let's do it.
okay.
So can you see what I'm seeing?
Yep, looks great.
Great. All right. So I'm just going to run through our channels so that if you're new to this, or maybe you just got called to communications and you don't know where to start, here's kind of a run through of where I'd begin. I have a stake website, and ours is just Beginning to Go Stake. It's lnstake.org. And you can put all of your upcoming stake events on there. We pull special stories and things that we love from our Instagram page, and we add them to the blog on the website. We also have like our local temple, a schedule, and even our own stake recommend interview. We keep a current list of missionaries serving from our stake. So I'm always encouraging people, if you have a free moment on a Sunday afternoon, you can shoot an email to a missionary. And President Evanson has done something really awesome this year, which is this Living Faith discussion series, which is a series of discussions with experts in church history. And it's the same kind of people you'd see, if you went to Education Week. He's really good at talking people into coming here. And we've had to do some of them via Zoom when COVID kind of, shut down some of our travel plans. But we've had some really amazing people, Stephen Harper, Terrell Gibbons. The next 3 that are coming are here. You can see Kate Holbrook, Barbara Morgan Gardner, Andrea Rodke Moss. So these are just awesome people, and they're coming talking about whatever is going on in Come Follow Me that month. And so we've kind of coincided the subject of their discussion along with that Come Follow Me schedule. We have a stake Instagram, and this is probably, right after I started my stake website, I'd probably start a stake Instagram. And this is really to talk to the members of the stake and also the community at large. But it has a weekly Come Follow Me post. The best thing I think is these personal experiences from people. You can see here this girl who went to Africa this summer and had an amazing experience doing a humanitarian trip. And when our missionaries come home, we ask for one great story from their mission. And we're really just trying to show, who we are, what we're about. We have a stake Facebook page. One thing I wanted to mention, we used to call ourselves LN Stake on everything. It's nice and short, which is great for social media. But part of the problem is that we started to become known in our community as LN Stake. And that doesn't mean anything if you're not a member of the church. So people would say, thanks for coming to our community event and for bringing volunteers, LN Stake. And that doesn't mean anything. So we've kind of morphed just in the last 6 months or so to Church of Jesus Christ, Laguna. And that's the name we're trying to go by now. So our Facebook page has profiles like this. This is a guy who's in our Laguna Beach ward who plays the organ every week at church, but he built this organ home at his home. This is his personal home organ. So stories like this where you hear, why did he get involved in music in the first place? What does music mean to him? And you get to know, these people on a personal level. He's not in my ward, but I know about him because of this post. So we're trying to, like you said, unify the stake. Third Hour is our private Facebook discussion group. And that's something you can do in Facebook where you can have a private group where only members of the stake can join. We approve whoever joins. We have a couple questions before people can join. And each week we pick a different member of the stake to host. So they'll post, 3 or 4 times throughout the week, things that they're teaching their own families about the Come Follow Me lesson that week. questions that they have. We've had some really interesting discussions about divorce and about, hard topics that come up sometimes in those Come Follow Me lessons. And because it's a private group, only members of the group can see comments and posts. So you don't have to worry that like your friends from high school are going to be listening in. We have a youth Instagram account. I think this is just for youth 11 to 18. And I know that everyone has different feelings about social media, and I totally get that. My own children who are teenagers don't have social media yet, but this is an account full of, teenagers and what they're up to, things that their experiences they're having at girls' camp and at youth conference. And if I see something, I'll screenshot it and text it to my own kids. They may not be on it themselves, but I still want them to hear these messages. We have a Twitter account, and we're kind of new to Twitter. We're trying to do like kind of short recaps of recent talks by church leaders, maybe some highlights from church news, and some local information as well. We're still kind of figuring out our sweet spot on Twitter, but it seems like there are some people who only use that platform. Good News Laguna is a page that we just started that I'm super excited about. It's on Instagram and Facebook, and it's totally community facing. And what it's supposed to be is just good news happening in our area. I've seen some of these Instagram pages, like Some Good News, where it shares good stuff happening all over the world, and that's great, but it's super cool to see it on a local level. So we're always looking for acts of kindness, or maybe people who volunteer in the community, local charities. There's usually like service opportunities happening all around us, blood drives and donation drives. We just collected a bunch of soccer gear that got sent to Mexico. We've been sewing baby blankets that just got taken to Africa. And really, we want this to be interfaith. We want it to be from churches all over our community, not just ours. We have a Stake YouTube channel, and sometimes we create our own videos, like this Living Faith discussion series I was talking about earlier. If you missed one, they're always, we just record them and put them up on the YouTube channel when we're done. We also try and do videos like when the seniors are graduating high school, and showing a picture of them when they were like in kindergarten, and just celebrating our seniors. We've also been doing some of our own stuff. We just had a senior mission fireside, and so we recorded a few videos about people who are serving in the temple, or people who had great experiences serving in China as teachers. And it's just a way for us to get the message out. So many people are just on YouTube, and maybe they can't come to something in person, but they can watch it later. It was actually really great during COVID too, because we could send messages out from the stake presidency. And I still remember like that first weekend when churches in California got shut down. So it was March 13th here in California. And we knew we couldn't go to church that Sunday. That was a weird feeling. But our stake President Evanson, recorded a message for all the stake members. And then he recorded a message from each bishop as well. So when you sat home, Sunday, when you should have been at church and you were doing your own church at home, you could turn on the TV and see a message from your stake president and a message from your bishop. And that was, super reassuring during those times. We also have a stake podcast. So a lot of the stuff that's on the stake YouTube channel, we'll just pull the audio and use that as a podcast. It's definitely not like a weekly podcast where we have a host and we're interviewing people. Maybe we'll get to that at some point. But right now, it's mostly just the audio from those Living Faith discussions. Sometimes we'll have messages from our stake leaders. If there's a really awesome talk, from stake conference, we'll pull something from there. And we did something cool for our Newport Beach temple. We had our 15th year anniversary last year, and we just pulled a bunch of different testimonies from people. So it was great to hear, the testimony of someone who is an ordinance worker, and the testimony of someone who had just gone through for the first time, and a member of the temple presidency. And we just recorded those all as just audio for our podcast. And you can listen to it wherever you already are listening. So if you're on Apple Podcasts or Anchor or Spotify. We have a local Just Serve page. So that's just a way for us to know about the local opportunities that are happening right in our cities. And it's also a great place to find things for kids. If you're trying to find, something kids can do, or teenagers, maybe a youth activity, you can find stuff there. And we have a YSA Instagram that's just for our college age kids, really 18 to 30. And we just figured out, like, that's where they are. They're on Instagram. And so it's the best way to get a message out. And, even if they're up at college, we still ask them to follow it, because there's stuff going on when they're home at Christmas. There's stuff going on when they're, home for the summer. So that's really an overview of our channels. So I'm going to unscreen share now.
Perfect. Yeah, I've got so many questions. I got a list of questions here. So, most stakes or wards, I think it's becoming more and more common to have a ward Facebook group, right? That's generally private, and you can announce stuff in there. But you have separate Facebook groups for different things, right? That even the Come Follow Me or the Third Hour is its own Facebook group. Yep. Was there a reason behind all that? I mean, it seems to make sense in hindsight, but.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our wards have their own pages as well. And I think that works on a ward level too. It's great to have a way to share, events and things that are going on for your ward.
Yeah.
But it's just too much for one channel, in my opinion. And especially, social media is kind of a divisive topic at the moment. Some people are super into it. Some people think it's the devil himself. And I think it's, I go back to Elder Bednar and what he said in 2015, which was that these are inspired tools that are created right now for us to spread the gospel. And so that's what we're trying to do.
That's cool.
And I guess I've learned, as I've been in this calling, I think I've been in this calling for maybe 4 years now, that each platform has its pros and cons. And each platform has, Facebook's really great for sharing, and Instagram's really great, for photos. So I don't think you can just pick one and put all your eggs in that one basket.
Yeah. And really just splitting them up like that will create options for people. Maybe they want some type of posts and not others, so they can join some groups and not others, rather than putting it all in one.
I'll say, even with that Third Hour group, which we named in jest, because the Third Hour had just gone away when we created it. But the idea was just that let's have a place where we can help people with their Come Follow Me, so that if maybe you're, Come Follow Me seemed to be working well for people who had a bunch of kids at home and you're studying it together. But what if you're a young adult and you're studying alone? Or what if you're, retired, your kids are out of the house and you're trying to do something? It was just kind of a community, where people could talk to each other. And I, get to see most of the people who join that. And I love when I see sometimes it'll say, a name I don't know. So I'll look it up in LDS Tools, and they're in the stake, but I've never heard of that person. They don't have a calling. And then they'll say, hey, I'm not active. I just want a way to study the scriptures with my kids. It's like, fantastic. Maybe that's the only page they feel comfortable joining. Maybe they aren't quite ready to come to church every week, but it gives them a little dose of something.
Yeah. So how do you just keep things going? Because with these different pages, and we need a youth story, we need a stake story, we need who's uploaded the podcast? Like, there's a lot of moving parts. I know this firsthand from just running Leading Saints, and so I mean, I can just see this turn into one more thing. I gotta go pester that person again for their story. So tell us about the nuts and bolts of it and how it works behind the scenes.
We try to have someone in our committee, like when we're picking people to join the committee, we're trying to find people that are in all the different wards. So you kind of have eyes and ears in each ward. Because most of the stories don't come because I call someone up and say, hey, you want to share a story? They come because someone makes a comment in Relief Society, and I hear it and think, there's a story there. There's more than what that comment said. Or someone will give a talk in sacrament meeting and mention something. And so I just have a notes page on my phone, and all the people on our committee do as well. And you're just listening.
Yeah.
And when you hear things, I jot it down real quick. And then after church, I am pestering people. And not everyone is cool with sharing their story in a broader way like that. They don't want to have their face on social media, and that's totally fine. Yeah. But most people, I think, have kind of caught the vision of this as a tool to just reach people.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that strategy. I interviewed a primary president a few weeks ago, and she talked about how she basically builds her primary program every year off of the talks that the kids gave the rest of the year, right? And so it's like the work's already done.
Yeah.
they've already practiced. Now they're just going to do it in sacrament meeting. So I
Yeah.
like this idea of that you just hear a story in a sacrament meeting talk and say that would be a good story, rather than going to somebody and saying we would like you to share a story. I don't know what that is. I mean, I'm sure that happens, but it
No, I think
really
that's
makes it
really
easier.
hard. That's
Yeah,
really hard for people
yeah,
to come up with one story, and to tell it succinctly. Instagram has a character limit. You can't go beyond 2,100, I think, and that's including spaces. So that's only 3-4 paragraphs.
yeah,
And if someone wants to tell us the story of your conversion, and I've gotten 5 pages, from people, and so trying to tell stories quickly, it helps if someone's already written a talk. They've already kind of done half of that work for you, because they figured out how to word it and how to tell it and the main points, and they've already kind of let go of the other things we love to throw in our stories.
yeah. So I don't know if you do this. Here's just a random Instagram hack that I learned that we started doing with leading saints, like especially with like stories or sharing messages. Because I write a newsletter every week and I send it out, and then like 6 weeks later, we post it on social media most of the time. And one tip I heard is we take all the text, the text of a newsletter, and then we just chop it up and paste it into 10 graphics. They're just using Canva, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we have 10 squares that with the text of all that, and then we post it, and then people, they swipe through the story rather than reading the long thing, and
Yep.
you get a lot better engagement that way. But that I don't know if that's
I,
something you already do.
Yeah, I totally agree. I
Yeah.
have realized that nobody likes to read anymore. I'm a reader myself, but no one likes to read. My background's in graphic design, so I understand like being able to see things visually, and making them look beautiful
Yeah.
is a huge part of our job.
Yeah.
And we just did something where we got a new member of the stake presidency, and he's a guy that not a ton of people know. He hasn't been in the stake that long, and so it was like 10 things you didn't know about President Stevens,
Oh, cool.
and a slide for each one, from him, working at Boy Scout camp to getting airlifted off a mountain one time, just interesting stuff that I think if you put that all in one post, 10% of the people would read it. And if you break it into chunks and
Yeah.
spread it out with pictures,
Yep.
90% of people will look
Yeah.
at it.
And do you use any tips as far as like simple graphic design tools like Canva is a favorite
Yeah.
one? Is that what you use, or do you have any others?
I use InDesign because I have
Okay.
it, and I realize most people don't. But like for our youth account, the woman who runs that, she does an awesome job, Casey Barker, and she just when I first talked to her, we kind of set up a pattern for the page. We're going to do 3 stories that are photos, and then we're going to do a quote. And
Mm,
so in Canva, we just came up with a really simple. I like to kind of customize my templates. I don't like to just use them straight out of the can from Canva. I like, you got to tweak the colors, make it look, unique to you, and have a color palette for your channel. So the youth account has like these 5 colors, and that's what gets used for all their slides. And it just makes the whole feed look more unified. And
yeah.
that pattern where you're doing photo, 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 slide,
Yeah.
on our
Yeah.
general account, we alternate. We do photo slide, photo slide. And so you just have sort of, there's a thoughtfulness to how the channel looks that I think people appreciate.
Yeah. So I know a few years ago the handbook was quite restrictive and sometimes confusing when it came to like ward websites, but now it's become more and more of a thing. There's a lot of leeway there. But any advice or uh tips as far as what's in the handbook and things that you're really trying to steer clear from to make sure you're not violating anything there, or is it pretty open?
Oh, it's a good question. We talk about this a lot I don't know if other areas have something like this, but in North America West, where we are, we have an area Facebook group for everyone in communications. And
Oh
that's been
wow.
super helpful. So if you have a specific question like, hey, can I name my page this? Is that okay? Um, People will answer you pretty quickly. And so if I ever have a question, the handbook is it's in need of some updates, and a lot of the things I just think were written a long time ago, and I know that the church knows that, and I'm sure that it's in process and being worked on. But in the meantime, it is kind of like a choose your own adventure calling. Like you kind of, I feel like we're kind of making it up as we go along and figuring out what works. Um, there are some specific things that you don't want to do. You don't want to call it, Bishop Ayers Ward, or something that's very specific to a person. You want to keep things. They used to say that you had to call it like news from Laguna Niguel Stake. And I think they've moved away from that because now a lot of the missions are having Facebook pages as well. I don't know if you've seen that where you are, but
Yeah.
a lot of the missions are starting to have a Facebook page, and they'll name it something like, Followers of Christ in Southern California, or something kind of, I don't want to say vague, but very like Christian focused, but not specifically LDS.
Yeah.
And they're having success with that too. So
Yeah. That's helpful. And then are all of your accounts from Facebook to Twitter to Instagram, are they all private? So you have to request to be included?
no, in fact, we try not to be private if we can, just because I think that that's a stepping stone that we don't want to put in front of like a community member who wants to join. The only one that's private is that Facebook group, because that was really meant to be like where like discussions are happening, and we didn't want to feel like we couldn't talk about, sensitive topics. And so that's the only one where you have to be a member to join. Everything else is public.
And that one is the third hour one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so how do you deal with trolls?
We don't really get them.
Oh yeah. That's
Yeah,
encouraging.
we haven't had a ton of trolling or super mean comments. I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe if we were more popular, we'd be getting more trolls. But for the most part, I know that we've been doing some things lately with the Newport Beach mission, which is kind of a new thing we're trying out, where we're trying to run some targeted ads on Facebook in conjunction with the mission. And this was an idea that came from Bode Swanson, who's in the Newport Beach Mission presidency, President Evans. And there's some area people involved as well. But it was like, instead of having the missionaries run their own pages, which was happening for a while, and making fun videos, and here we are playing basketball, and we're talking about the scriptures and all that.
Yeah.
Like, I think they had a little bit of success with that, but I think they realized like this isn't maybe the best use of our time or our efforts. And some people were super good at it, and some people were not that good at it. And they're running cameras that aren't that great. And it's just, I think they decided, why don't we already have a robust social media platform, at least in our stake. Why don't we just use that and have the missionaries? We're running these ads, and the ads are for things that we think people in the community would be interested in, like family history. Like, hey, do you know who your great grandparents are? And then someone answers back, yeah, I'd like to know more. And then it's the missionaries who answer those. So we have missionaries who are admins on our pages, and they're responding to these requests saying, let's get you started on family search. Or maybe there's something about Really Society. We've been saying like, the oldest Christian women's group in the world, come join our meetings, or we're having activities locally. And so people are saying, it says, what city do you live in? And they say Laguna Niguel. And then the missionaries get back to them with like, we're going paddleboarding next week, or we're having a picnic on this day. And so the missionaries are kind of doing the legwork on that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful. And then as far as like, it sounds like some of the channels are mainly for members of the church in the area, and others are more public facing. Is there any intention there, or are they all sort of intended to be public facing?
No, I mean, so our Instagram page we used to say, yeah, that's public facing. And then I would look through the people who were following it, and they were all members of the stake or former members of the stake. It was hard for me to find people who were just members of the community who happened upon our page and decided to start following it. So this idea that you can create one page that is going to serve all three of your needs, it's going to be a mission page, it's going to be inward facing, and it's going to be outward facing. I just decided it's not that feasible to speak to all three audiences at one time. And that's why we've kind of diversified that. It's like, okay, we're going to have this stake Instagram page, and we're mostly going to be talking to members because that's who's following it.
Yeah.
And then we started this community facing page, this Good News Laguna. And we're pretty much all community members at that point on that one. We're just starting that one up. And it's the kind of things people want to hear. And finding stories for that takes a little more work, because we're trying to not make it about members of the church, make it about everything going on in the community, which means you're spending time in, community Facebook groups for your local cities, and finding stories there, and reaching out to people who don't know you, and trying to get photos and permission to post things. But it's starting to work.
That's cool. That's great. And then Oh, I love just the concept of like creating this infrastructure. Like you had this infrastructure, and then the world turned upside down with COVID, and immediately your stake president had a venue to make a video and send it out,
Yeah.
right? And
No, that was huge, huge.
yeah. And I even see this, I've seen other stakes do it where, gearing up for maybe an upcoming stake conference, you can use these channels to really promote and make people aware of it rather than, you know, announcing it in sacra meeting and hoping people are paying attention, right? Because
Yeah.
this is where attention is on social
Well,
media. So
can I just talk about two things we've
yeah.
done that have kind of prepared people for a future event? So one was, in general conference when President Nelson said that we should be studying the restoration, prior to, I forget which conference it was, like a year ago. And so, it's the 200th anniversary, study the restoration. So most people, it's like, yeah, I'll get to that. And so we decided, how can we make it a little easier for members of our stake to follow the prophet? And so we created a little reading guide, and it was, maybe 8 weeks. And it was the 8 weeks prior to conference, and we just released one thing a week. So it was like week 1, hey, why don't you, listen to Truman Madsen's Joseph Smith? And the next week was, hey, why don't you read all 4 accounts of the first vision from Joseph Smith Papers? And the next thing was, hey, Joseph Smith Papers released this great podcast. Listen to an episode of that, and on and on and on. So we just kind of pulled all the best content that is already out there, and we're feeding it to the stake one thing at a time, and introducing each one with a testimony of someone who had read it and shared their thoughts on it. So that was one. And then the other one was our Newport Beach temple had its 15th anniversary, and we did a similar thing where we created, a video of all the people who were there, when it was being dedicated, and all the work that went into, before that happened, and personal testimonies of people serving in the temple, and, reading the dedicatory prayer, just things so that when an event happens, everyone's kind of done some work beforehand. I guess you're front loading it so that you're not walking in to stake conference blind.
Yeah, no, I love that. That without that, it would be hard to do that just with the flip of the switch, right? You sort of have to build this out, make sure people are aware of it, and away it goes. So, so is your podcast is also public facing? Like it's not a private podcast feed, right?
Mm-mm. Nope, it's
Nice.
just out there,
Yeah.
and that's it's not something where we're super diligently creating content for it every week.
Yeah.
We're pulling things that already exist, but I just know as a busy mom, I have 4 kids of my own. Listening to a podcast is way easier for me than watching a video. So if I can, put it on the car while I'm running errands, or listen to it while I'm on a walk, I just feel like you're hitting a whole group of people who might not take the time to sit and watch a video on YouTube for an hour.
Yeah. So I, in a few words ago, I'm actually in the process of in my current word of creating a word podcast, but a past word podcast I created where I would interview people, right? And it was great. We got to hear stories, and it just was another way similar to what you're doing with some of these other channels. And I'm curious how you handled the situation where, naturally, as I'm recording stories, I want to start with the older generation in the ward, and I would approach them with this with this idea of a podcast and interviewing and telling their stories, and they felt like, what, you're gonna shout my social security number like from the root? Like they just felt like it was they wouldn't hear none of it because they didn't understand how it worked, and somehow it's just too public or whatever. And so how do you handle when people feel like, "Oh, I don't want my story out there," or they feel like it's out there more than it really is?
Yeah, it's all good points. We've had situations where we have a woman in our ward who is amazing, always doing fantastic service projects, always has something going on. I've wanted to highlight her for a while, and share the stuff that she's doing. She just doesn't want the spotlight on her. She told me, that's not why I do it. She's quoting scriptures about, if you proclaim your own good works, then, that's your reward and not your reward in heaven. And I understand that. I also really get privacy concerns with children. If you don't want your kids' faces on things, especially not associated with their name, I get it. And I feel strongly about that with my own children. But I just have come around to the fact that, like, if we don't share our stories, no one gets to hear them. And that's how you build unity in a stake and in a ward across families, is sharing our stories. So
Yeah.
I think it's just a hurdle you have to get over. We've been doing these, been going around to the wards and kind of trying to help people catch the vision of seeing, social media as the new mission tool, and wanting them to share things on their personal channels, and feel free to, if a story touches them, to share it, on their own Facebook or social media. And people are hesitant, and I get it. I just think it's a hurdle you have to get over.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just the more you do it and you establish these things, they're well taken care of. They look great. Like over time, I think more and more people open up to that possibility,
Yeah.
so that's awesome. And I love the concept. I've seen other stakes do it with Just Serve, like creating an Instagram account for Just Serve rather than being, oh, there's the Just Serve website and you just post something there, but sort of creating, bridging it over to social media is really powerful.
Yeah. Well, and there's been a lot of things locally that have been happening. Like, there will just be a need that crops up. Like someone needed to collect a bunch of books for some organization. I forget which one. And it was like, how do we get the message out that we need? Everyone's got a few books in their closet they can get rid of. And how do we get the message out? And it's like, just put it on the Just Serve, Instagram page. And,
Yeah.
There's a donation box at the church. There's one on this doorstep. And then magically they get filled up. And it's happened. We've done it with shoes. We've done it with soccer gear. We've done it with books, all kinds of things. We did an underwear drive. It's just people will come out of the woodworks to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, as we wrap up here, like if there's a stake or somebody listening that's excited about this, like where should a stake even start?
I think that I would start with, it's a hard question. I think I would start with an Instagram page and a matching Facebook account. You need to really do both. Especially with younger people, the youth are really more on Instagram, although all the missionaries are getting sucked into Facebook because they have to do that as part of their mission usually. So I would start with an Instagram account, and then you can just, there's a button that you can click on Instagram that shares the same content on your Facebook page. So you don't even have to post it in both places. You can post it at the same time. And that's probably where I would start. I think having a stake website is also super helpful. So maybe those three things: stake Facebook, stake Instagram, stake website. And can I just share one story?
Yeah.
That something that we've seen that I didn't really catch the vision of until recently is the power of sharing a post. And we had this story. I found it looking for something for our Good News Laguna page, that community page, about a kid who was down at Doheny, a local beach, and he likes to watch the sunset with his dad. And this kid, he's 18, he's born with cerebral palsy, so he has some physical limitations. And he and his dad are sitting on the beach talking, and he's telling his dad, I need to learn how to surf. It's been on my bucket list for all these years. And his dad is saying, like, yeah, I just don't know how to make that happen, And this woman, her name's Veronica, who just happened to be riding by on her bike, overhears this conversation and stops and says, you want to learn how to surf? And the kid says, yeah. And she says, well, I just taught myself the last couple of years. I could probably help you. And so she said, why don't you meet me Thursday at Doheny at 2? So Aaron's like, great, I'll meet you Thursday. And this woman, Veronica, starts posting in these community groups for Dana Point. And she says, hey, here's the situation. Can anyone help? And all these people come out of the woodworks. Someone says, I'll come and I'll give him a little lesson before, so he doesn't go in blind. And someone else says, hey, I can bring a board. A local surf shop says, we'll bring a board. And other people say, I can donate some money. Maybe we can get him a wetsuit. And other people who surf say, we'll make sure we're in the water with him so that he has kind of a protective bubble around him while he's trying to get up. And a bunch of other people say, I'm just going to come and stand on the beach with a sign, and cheer him on. And so when Aaron shows up on Thursday, there's this whole crowd of people here, waiting for him. I mean, so awesome. Yeah. And he goes out on this board, and, of course he gets up, and even the fire trucks come and they're lining the jetty down at Doheny. And anytime he gets up, they send their sirens off. So it just becomes this whole celebration on the beach, all because of this one woman who did this thing. And, at the end of the day, the surf shop tells him to keep the board, so It's just a great story. So we
Yeah.
posted that on Good News Laguna. It's like the exact kind of story we want. It's local. It's about someone helping someone. And, on Instagram, it got like, 50 likes and like 4 comments. And you're like, okay. And then I put it on Facebook and it gets like 550, comments and, 100, 100 shares. And so we start realizing like, it's great to read a story like that and think, wow, that's so cool. It really warms my heart. It's another thing to share it and have it reach a whole different audience. And so that little story, that only was seen by a couple hundred people on Instagram, the Facebook, I think it's up to 26,000 or something people have seen that story because it just keeps getting reshared and reshared.
Oh,
So I've kind of caught the vision of like, it's not okay to just see it and say like, oh yeah, that's really touching to me. The next step that we need people to take is to share it with other people.
yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. I love that. And this is, I don't mean to slip back into maybe more technical question. I'm curious with those public facing groups, like, is there anything you do to sort of transition to maybe a missionary opportunity, or you just are purely just doing good and you're not worrying about, an
Yeah.
invitation or making that introduction?
So far we're just sharing good, and we're really trying to share good across all religions, not
Yeah.
just our own. And that's been a little trickier than I've thought. We have some interfaith relationships, especially in Laguna Beach, but trying to get people to share stories, because there is good stuff happening all over, and it's happening all around us, and it's just a matter of taking the time to
Yeah.
document it, get photos, get permission. It's is I think that there is huge potential for there to be mission opportunities connected to that community page, but it's not the focus right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And do they know? I mean, do you put it in the bio, what's your stake name or
We
anything? Or
do. It does.
okay.
It does say, I think it says sponsored by or hosted by
Uh-huh.
the Church of Jesus Christ Laguna.
Nice. Nice. Well,
That
have we
was much
covered?
debated about whether or not we should include that or not,
Yeah,
but
I bet.
I don't ever want anyone to feel like it's like a bait and switch, like
Yeah,
hey, I
exactly.
thought I came here for good news stories and now I'm getting hit with, Joseph Smith. So
Yeah.
I never want people to feel that way. It's really just trying to uplift the whole community by focusing on the good happening around us.
Yeah. That's awesome. Have we covered it all? Any other point or story that you wanted to hit before we wrap
Oh,
up, or do we get
I,
it?
I think we hit most of it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, Brooke, the last question I have for you is just as you have gone through this journey of you know implementing social media and in your stake and creating unity there, definitely a leadership role. How has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
It's a good question. Um, I think it has helped me just by seeing the goodness of other people, by watching the stories of a lot of people are following Christ and doing things just quietly on their own, and they don't necessarily want to be spotlighted. But I think by sharing those kinds of stories, it inspires the rest of us to maybe step it up a little or to think of ways that we can grow closer to Christ, to make him more the center of our lives and our families and our wards and our stake.